Miller Park is one of America's smallest AZA-accredited facilities. The zoo was officially started around the year 1900 when a lion cub from a circus ended up on a farm. 12 years later, when the lion died, money was raised to build a building to later house large animals called the Katofer Animal Building. Structures that resemble modern-day zoo buildings did not begin to be constructed until the mid-1960s. An expansion called the Woodland Wing was later added onto the Katofer building. Since the first building opening in 1914, the zoo has more than doubled in size. The Miller Park Zoo's mission statement is as follows: to expand our understanding of the interrelationship between people and animals and the need to preserve the natural resources of the world. The zoo is home to over 300 animals, ranging from educational chinchillas all the way up to the male Sumatran tiger. As a swing intern, I was able to work with a lot of these animals on a regular basis, with the main areas I rotated around being big cats and children's zoo. In the big cats area, I encountered the Sumatran tiger, the snow leopards, the gibbons, the tree kangaroo, the red pandas, a greater rhea, guanacos, cranes, a Pallas cat, North American river otters, 3 harbor seals, a family of red-ruffed lemurs, and 2 majestic great horned owls. In Children's Zoo, I interacted with a Texas longhorn, a shorthorn cow, a reindeer, San Clement goats, chickens, cockatoos, kookaburras, flamingos, wallabies, wallaroos, and a prehensile-tailed porcupine named Magoo. These 2 areas account for approximately 100 animals, a little over a third of the entire zoo's inhabitants. As a swing intern, my zookeeper and I would cover the areas that other zookeepers were headed over when they had days off. On Sundays and Mondays, we would be in the big cats area. On Tuesday and Wednesday, we would be in Children's Zoo. And on Thursdays, we would be in Zoo Lab. Or if Zoo Lab was already covered by a part-time keeper, we would be extra hands for projects. On the days we were in big cats, my zookeeper would go do rounds, making sure that all the animals in our area were safe and accounted for in their enclosures. If an animal was unaccounted for in morning rounds, a code was to be called depending on the animal. Once a code is called, every animal husbandry personnel is to stop what they are doing and go assist the corresponding area in location, recapture, and assessment of the animal. However, this rarely occurs. For a normal morning, while my zookeeper is checking our area, I head straight to the kitchen and begin seal and otter diets. On the meat fridge, there's a chart of how many fish and what kind of fish each seal and otter gets. These are set up by the big cat's regular zookeeper and the veterinarians for the zoo. Alongside that is the medications and supplements each animal receives. Every day, there are 2 feeding shows, seals first and then the otters next door. The feeding times are 10:30 and 3:30. And at the very end of the day, the seals get a free feeding session. This is where a majority of their diet is. This is so they are hungrier and thus more likely to do the desired behaviors during the feeding shows. Each seal gets a bucket for each feeding. Following the guidelines, I fill 9 buckets for the seals, each with their names labeled on them, and 2 buckets for the otters. Their medicated fish go in a plastic cup, which sit inside the morning buckets. This is to make sure that the seals each get their prescribed dosages of vitamins and medications. By the time I finish with seal diets, it is time to go clean the big cat den. This includes snow leopards and the Sumatran tiger. This also included Candy, the oldest sun bear in North American captivity, but sadly she passed away last November. As protocol states, no one other than zookeepers is allowed to have keys in the back den area, and must always have a radio on them at all times in case of emergency. My zookeeper, through automated switches and levers, shifts the animals to their outside enclosures, locking them outside. Once he is positive that there are no animals inside, he unlocks the back ends for me to clean. Using a shovel and a dustpan, because these are not your average dog-sized poops, they are much, much larger, I remove any feces from the dens. I also remove leftover enrichment, such as barrels, hay, boxes, paper, medicine balls, and any leftover prey items, such as little chicks or birds. Then, taking the power hose, I hose everything to the back drains. Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday, they get disinfected with bleach and Virex and get scrubbed, but on other days, a regular hose down will do. Once the back dens are clean, the animals that have been out in the building overnight but do not have outdoor enclosures need to be shifted to the back den area. Once successfully shifted, their enclosures will be cleaned, hosed, and refilled with the diet. These animals are the gibbons and the tree kangaroo. Once all of the cleaning is done in the Big Cats building, it's time for the seal and otter training shows. Zookeepers are the only ones allowed to go actually down into the pool area with the seal, but interns are allowed to stand alongside the pool and watch. During the summer, a JZK gives a seal talk while the keepers train the animals. JZK stands for Junior Zookeeper. These students can be as young as 13, but can stay a JZK until the summer after they graduate high school. Each zookeeper has a certain number of JZKs and volunteers assigned to them, and periodically throughout the day, the zookeeper is responsible for going and checking on them to make sure their tasks are being accomplished accurately. After the seal feeding, my zookeeper would leave and I would be in charge of the otter feeding. During my previous internship with Miller Park, I was training the otters alongside my zookeeper, so this summer I was able to go it alone. During these trainings, I talked a little bit about the history of the North American river otters in general, and then more specifically talked about the zoo's otters. This usually lasted about 10 to 15 minutes, depending on how many questions I received. After this was done, I would take all the fish buckets back to the kitchen for our meal prep JZK to clean. I would then grab the morning diet for the red pandas, the Pallas cat, the owls, and the red-ruffed lemurs. I would go do the red pandas first. Using a ball of cranberries, I would medicate the male red panda. Sometimes I would have to chase him and corner him to get him to take it, but we had to make sure he got the medication inside and not the female. Once he got his medication, the 2 bowls full of diet could be placed anywhere in the exhibit. Then using a rake and shovel, I would remove the poop and any enrichment pieces. Because this enclosure was outside and full of mulch, there was no need for hosing. Next, I would do the same thing to the Pallas cat exhibit. I would use a shovel and rake to remove poop, enrichment items, and old food. Because the Pallas cat is a carnivorous hunter, we had to spray its prey items such as rats, mice, birds, fish, and other things around the enclosure. After the Pallas cat, I would give the empty dishes from the day before to the JZK doing dishes before taking the lemur diet to their enclosure. There, I would meet my zookeeper. 2 people have to go in as a safety precaution, as the adult lemurs were territorial and aggressive over their new baby. While my zookeeper distracts the lemurs and hand feeds them, I clean up their poop, enrichment, and spilled food. Once this is finished, we head up to quarantine. Generally, whoever is in charge of big cats also take care of all quarantine animals. And a strict protocol is that once a person messes or enters quarantine, they cannot handle any of the neonatal animals in the zoo for 24 hours. This prevents the spread of disease and pathogens to animals who do not yet contain the immune systems to fight against them. And while on the topic of pathogen and disease control, whenever entering and leaving quarantine, you are required to step in a boot wash to sanitize your footwear. It was found that footwear is one of the largest vectors, a means of transmitting a disease or parasite from one animal to another. The animals that were in quarantine while I was there were 2 guanacos and a rhea. Guanacos are wild counterparts to llamas, and the 2 we had were brother and sister. They came from the same zoo and had to be quarantined for 60 days per AZA rules. The same applied for the greater rhea. It's a smaller version of almost an emu. After we cleaned and fed the quarantine animals, it was almost time for lunch. But before I leave quarantine, I have to do the underwater quality test. Using a sample of water from the inside seal building, I test the pH, temperature, and the acidity of the water. If it is not up to standards, chemicals and bleach are added at the discretion of the zookeeper on duty. Guidelines to help make the correct calculations are always hanging up in the quarantine building. Next, we would take the dirty dishes to the kitchen and got training treats. Almonds for the tree kangaroo and meatballs and goat milk for the tiger. My zookeeper would work on target training with the tree kangaroo to get him used to moving around his new enclosure. For the tiger, they would do more behaviors relevant to veterinary tricks, such as getting him to extend upwards along the fence to look at paws and stomach areas. After this, it's time for lunch. When we come back from lunch, we pretty much do what we did in the morning. The pandas get fed their PM diets along with the shoot of bamboo. The Pallas cats get kibble mixed with horse meat. The lemurs get their PM diets, and the guanacos and rhea get some brush and alfalfa hay. The zookeepers do the afternoon seal feeding, and I do the afternoon otter feeding. Then we go and put the meat in the inside enclosures. The meat is scattered to encourage natural hunting and scavenging behaviors. By this time, it's about 4:30 and almost time for the day to be over. The big cats are let inside and locked in for the night, along with the gibbons. After they are all locked in, I go to the kitchen and finish dishes if the JZK did not get them all cleaned, while my zookeeper goes and makes sure all the animals are present and locked in their enclosures. Once I get done with those last dishes, I go and take the third set of seal buckets to their pool. Although this is not a training session, in order to send the seals to separate areas to make sure they get their designated fish, I am able to use physical and verbal commands to make them move around the pool. From that point on, I am able to free feed them their individual buckets, hopefully. Sometimes this doesn't really work because our seals are greedy adolescents. After I'm finished with the feeding, I return to the kitchen, wash the fish buckets to avoid the kitchen smelling gross in the morning, and this completes my day. This is a typical day in the Big Cats area. The only exception is on Tuesdays, because Tuesdays are vet days. So if I'm working in those areas on those days, depending on the animals at the top of the vet's priority list, some things get done earlier or later, or we may spend longer in a particular area. As I said earlier, on most Tuesdays and Wednesdays, we are in Children's Zoo. To start our days in Children's Zoo, we grab diets for the porcupine, cockatoos, the cockaboras, the wallaroos, wallabies, and the chickens from the fridge. We place all the diets in a large container because we will not be back to the kitchen for the majority of the day. First, we go to the cow enclosure. In our enclosure, we have a male Texas Longhorn, a female Randall Lineback, a reindeer, and our intact goat male. Setting the bucket of diets aside, we go into the quarantine building where the diets for these animals are placed during the previous day. The reindeer is extremely old and must be supplemented and medicated on a daily basis. So my zookeeper takes the other three animals their food in the enclosure while I move the reindeer into the inside portion of the building before locking her in and giving her food and meds. This just ensures that she's the only one taking the medication and not being pushed around by the other three younger animals in the enclosure. Next, I move on to the petting zoo barn with the chicken diets while my zookeeper moves to check that all animals in our Australia exhibit are still present. When I get to the barn, I unlock it and bring in the pregnant mothers and Charlie, the geriatric goat. I also put the chickens' diets in the barn fridge to keep their greens and mealworms fresh for the PM feeding. Inside the barn are 5 pens. I lock the 2 pregnant mothers into 2 separate pens because they can get a little pushy and aggressive when they're hungry, but I let Charlie roam around. Written on the board are the types of pellets, hay, and medications everyone gets. Following these guidelines, I feed these 3 priority goats inside. Next, I move to the yard where the other goats are. I refill their hay dispensers, water buckets, and throw a handful of pellets out for them to share. The other goats don't need the nutrient-concentrated pellets as much as their priority goats because throughout the rest of the year, when it is not summer, the petting yard is locked and visitors can pay 25 cents to get large handfuls of pellets to throw to the goats. Essentially, they are fattened during the winter months. After that, I unlock the chicken coops, letting them into the yard. If the JZK isn't there yet, I remove their bedding and replace it, while also refeeding their grain buckets. However, if the JZK is there, which they usually are, I instruct them to clean the coops, change the beddings, feed the chickens their morning grain, sweep the yard of hay, and then hose all the poop to the drain. I leave the JZKs to accomplish these tasks so I can go and start cleaning the flamingo building. On Tuesdays, I have to deep clean out outdoor flamingo pool. First, I let all the water drain out, controlled by controls and levers on the inside of the flamingo building. Then, using slower movements as to not scare the birds, I power hose all the poop and grime towards the drain. When all the feathers and mud and sand are over the graded drain, I pick them up and throw them away. This is to avoid the draining system from becoming clogged. Once it is clear as possible, I go back into the building and replace the pool plug and turn on the water that fills the pool. While the pool is refilling, I empty and refill the feeder pool, a much smaller pool that is used just to hold food in. Our feeder pool is filled with wet pellets, complete in the nutrients flamingos require to survive. The only significant difference is that our diets lack the nutrients found in shrimp that give the flamingos their natural pink coloring. This, however, does not deter from their overall health. Next, I spray their mud mounds. Flamingos naturally require wet, muddy environments to build nests and subsequently mate in. We try to stimulate as close to a natural environment that we can to encourage natural behaviors. After this is all done, I head back to the goat yard to check on the JZK. If they are almost done cleaning and hosing, I unlock the gates to allow guests to come in and pet and interact with the animals. By this time, the sun is starting to rise and it's getting pretty hot. Before it gets too hot, I meet my zookeeper at the cow yard, where we use rakes and shovels to pick up the poop. There's usually a lot of poop and is very heavy, which means it takes us a while to clean the yard. We try to get it done as quickly as possible under the heat. Once we finish this, I head to Australia. I hose and clean Henry, the cockatoo's inside overnight exhibit. Then I move to the porcupine enclosure. Being careful not to run into the porcupine and making sure that all the branches inside his exhibit can still support his weight, I clean the leftover food and poop from the ground before replacing it with new food and refilling the water bowl. When he's taken care of, I move to the kookaburra exhibit. Whatever food I was not eaten from the previous day is removed, and new prey items are placed around the exhibit to encourage scavenging and hunting behavior. By this time, it is time for lunch. When we get back from lunch, it is time for PM diets, medications, and lockups. First is the reindeer. She's given her PM medications and locked into the cow building, along with some alfalfa hay to keep weight on her. Next, the wallabies and wallaroos are given access to their building where some of their food is. They are locked out of the building throughout the day during cleaning time for their own safety. It is imperative that the inside room is completely dry to avoid any poisoning or toxicosis of the animals via water puddles with chemicals mixed in still being present. Next, Henry is brought back inside for the night and given his diet for the day. After this, we head back to the chicken coops. Because of their stubbornness, the chickens have to be chased into their coops and locked inside. They are also given vegetables like lettuce and carrots and mealworms. The JZKs leave and the gates are locked again for the night. The pregnant goats are brought inside to be given their PM diets, and if not close to giving birth, are released back into the yard with the others. If they are around their expected due date or past it, they are locked in the barn for the night. Charlie is also brought in briefly to be administered his meds. Once the chickens and goats are taken care of, the entire barn is locked for the night. Next, we go to the kitchen and double check that all the diets for the next day are completed. If not, I finish the diets and place them in the non-meat fridge only. The last thing we do is go through the Australia area and lock the gates, making sure all visitors are out before securing it for the night. We count all of our animals and then we're done for the day. Because of the size of this zoo, lots of events are held to 1. Raise additional funds, 2. Thank members for their membership and continued support, 3. Encourage new members to sign up, and 4. Expose members to special perks. Some daily events that we have are our free otter and seal feedings. Additionally, Miller Park holds 4 budgie feedings daily for an additional fee to the cost of admission. Sometimes after hours, the zoo has members' nights where public citizens with memberships can get exclusive behind-the-scenes looks at the zoo. Most of them take place during the fall and winter months. The most important one is Zoo Doo. During Zoo Doo, art made by and with the animals is auctioned off. This is also the time where all the baby animals born in the year are named. The highest bidder gets to name their own animal, and that name is what sticks with them throughout their whole life. Usually the baby goats and the baby show leopards are the biggest attractions for donors. However, this past year we had a surprise for our donors. Our red wolf pair has successfully mated and given birth to 4 new pups, which the donors also got to name. The zoo also hosts events based on current trends. For example, when Pokemon Go was a big trend, the zoo was a hot spot to find Pokemon. To benefit from this fad, the zoo had an event and stayed open longer than usual to attract more guests. This internship is located in Bloomington Normal. This location has lots of advantages. For me, the main advantage was being located in my hometown, so I didn't have to worry about or pay for housing. However, because Bloomington Normal is a college town, it is fairly easy to find housing if an intern needs it. A major disadvantage is the fact that the land the zoo is located on is not very large. Thus, the zoo cannot be conventionally expanded unless some other things were removed. So essentially, they're kind of stuck with whatever land they have now. The zoo is also located in a smallish town, so on your days off and after work, there's little to do. My advice to anyone doing this internship is to 1. Learn quickly, because the faster you learn how to do basic things, the sooner you'll get to do cool things like train otters and paint with baby snow leopards. 2. Drink so much water. You spend 10 to 12 hours a day out in extreme heat, and if you don't stay hydrated, you're going to be miserable and your body will hate you for it. We have to constantly remind the J's and K's to drink water, and we still get 1 or 2 that pass out or get so heat stressed they get physically ill. 3. Don't be afraid to pick the zookeeper's brains. They do this for a living and are very knowledgeable about the animals they care for. And 4. Learn how to effectively share your knowledge with the public. AZA zoos are meant to provide substantial care for the animals, but also to educate the public on the animals they physically see and their wild counterparts that they don't get to see. To intern at Miller Park Zoo, you must be enrolled in a 4-year college with a degree program involving animals. For example, animal science, biology, physiology, animal behavior, captive wildlife management, and etc. To apply, you have to send in a resume detailing the work you've done with animals, a cover letter stating what position you're applying for, and why it would benefit you to the zoo's curator, Peter Burbinage. You must also fill out Miller Park's application, which you can find on their website or the official AZA website,